I know it's been a while, but I promise it was definitely worth the wait. This episode was recorded last month, but hey, here we are. On this episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem, I had an awesome conversation with Heath Cummings. You probably know Heath for his work with CBS Sports. We chatted about all kinds of things, including cooking steaks in the dark, starting a fantasy football show as an insurance agent, his actual first name, Lil Nas X at the Super Bowl, and random internet facts. Make sure you're following Heath on Twitter at HeathCummingsSR. Also, give me a follow on Twitter at TheCaseyKasem and the pod at GetReal_pod. Make sure to come see me at the Fantasy Football Expo, Sunday, August 14th in Canton, Ohio. I'll be emceeing the Women in Fantasy Football panel, so don't miss it. Tickets and additional information can be found at thefantasyfootballexpo.com. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. And now, here's my conversation with Heath Cummings. Just gonna move on into this awesome sit down with my lovely and awesome and dope and rad. We could go on for days. You guys are probably wondering who I'm talking about, and we're about to get to that. This is Heath Cummings, and we're gonna learn more about his journey in the space as well as who he is as a person in general. So, Heath, how are you doing tonight?
Fantastic. I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to having a chat with you as well, because, you know, I've been wanting to do this for a while and it just hasn't really worked out, but now it is. And that's always the story with people, but I'm so happy that this is able to happen. So I just want to jump right in and talk about growing up. Like, where did you grow up, and, you know, what was the experience like growing up?
Yeah. Well, first off, you're too kind, because the reason it didn't happen is because I canceled last time.
Well, so I mean, I've had to cancel. Listen, you know, it was probably for the best that you did, because I think that day actually wasn't that great for me anyway, so it wouldn't have been a fun time.
Yeah, that's
for me.
We'll go. No. Yeah, let's see. I'll just go all the way back to the beginning. I was born in a town called Butler, Missouri. No one's ever heard of it. I think it had around 2,000 people. And it was what they call them in Missouri, the county seat. So like the courthouse for the entire county was there. And it was this tiny little town. The other towns around us were like 500 people. I lived there until I was 12. Everybody looked and talked just like me. And I moved to a place called Harrisonville, Missouri, another place nobody's ever heard of, but slightly larger. It has 9 or 10,000 people, and still everyone looked and talked just like me. And I lived there until I moved to South Florida for this job. But, you know, it was a pretty normal upbringing, I guess. Nothing too out of the ordinary for that part of the country.
And were you involved in sports growing up, or did you watch sports, play sports, any of that?
Oh, sports were, and it's really strange because my parents, neither one were into sports at all when I was a kid. And now they both are more so, I think, because of my, you could call it passion if you wanted to be positive, or obsession, one or the other. But yes, that was my grandfather. I called him Poppy, was my best friend really until I was like in middle school, and then I started being a jerk. But he was into sports. And so I like my first sports memory. I remember it was my great grandmother's 96th or 95th or 96th birthday party. And it was at a nursing home, and I was 6 years old. And he snuck me out early to go watch the Super Bowl when the Bears just trounced the Patriots. And I remember starting that game thinking I'm cheering for the Bears. And then at halftime, it was like 40-0. And then this empathy creeps in, and I'm like, I'd like for the Patriots to have a little bit of success. But that's my first sports memory with him. That's
really awesome. A lot of people, you know, I've actually had a few people come on the show saying that, you know, their grandparents were the ones who got them into sports, which is super awesome. So on the playing sports side of everything, how was that for you as a child playing sports?
It was pretty good. It was a different world back then. Like, I've got kids in sports now, and now rec leagues are pretty much non-existent, or they exist, but it's a completely different thing. And everybody who wants to play high school sports plays in competitive leagues. That wasn't the experience I had at all when I was growing up. Like, I played baseball, I played soccer, I played basketball, I played football for just a little bit, but I was like 6 foot tall at 13 and weighed 135 pounds. So I wasn't really built like a football player. I played corner, I think, one year. I made a game-saving tackle actually in 8th grade football in overtime. at the goal line. And it was very typical me fashion. I think I grabbed the guy's jersey, spun around and fell down, and he came with me out of bounds. But no, like I was an okay baseball player. I played golf and basketball in high school. All throughout high school. But again, if I had gone to school, I live in Boca Raton now. If I had gone to school down here, I don't think I would have been a good enough athlete to play any of those sports in high school. But there were 200 people in my graduating class. So it was like, who wants to play the sport? Okay, you're on the team.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was the same thing for me in high school. Like, I grew up in a town that's the county seat. I actually work at the courthouse in the county that I live in still. So yeah, and in the school, I was like on varsity track and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that shouldn't have happened, but it did. So, so growing up and being involved in sports like that, now I hear you also coach now. Do you coach?
Yes. Yeah. I started coaching when my oldest son, who is now 20, was in second grade, coaching his basketball team. And I coached soccer. I coached my daughter's softball team for a while, but she wasn't very athletic, first off, but she wasn't really into it either at the time I was doing that. And I was always a super competitive guy. So I probably wasn't as good with her as I should have been. She ended up playing volleyball in high school and doing just fine. It's probably better she had different coaches. But yeah, I've coached basketball for, I guess 15 years now. Now I coach my 12-year-old's team. He plays competitive basketball. That's the only sport he plays. And it's like I have, as the coach, have to pull back on the parents and some of the rest of the players because they would really like it if we could just play basketball every weekend for the entire year. I'm like, I'd like to do some other things.
Yeah, that does sound like, we're not going to do that all year round. No, but so other things that you like to do you still play golf?
I am probably the only person in the world who played a ton of golf, moved to South Florida, and just completely stopped. I've played one time in the 7 years that I've lived here.
Wow.
I think it might change eventually, but the problem is, like with my current setup, I'm not going to be able to play golf probably from August through January just because of work. I don't have the free time to go spend 4 to 6 hours by myself on the golf course and nobody else in the family plays.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't played since 2016, I don't think. And I was never great, but I was fine. I was good enough to enjoy the game. Do
you play like any pickup basketball or any of that fun stuff? Or
I play zero team sports. Currently.
I think, and you know what? More power to people that can, but there's not enough time in the day for all that stuff. And plus, I'm lazy.
Right. Like and this is embarrassing. I'll share an embarrassing Heath sports story. But I just recently this week, for the first time, lost to my 12-year-old. Oh. And he's more talented now than I was as a high school senior. He's really a talented kid, but he's also like 5'6" or 5'7", so he shouldn't be beating me yet. He beat me on, I think it was last Wednesday. We went to the courts. He was convinced he was going to. He said, we'll play to 11. We played to 11. I beat him. He said, Dad, can we play one more to 5? And I'm just gassed. One game to 11. I've got nothing left because like 100 degrees here.
Yeah. So
I say, okay, I'll play one more. And he beat me pretty convincingly. I said, well, we just played a full game and you only beat me to 5. Well, the next day he's like, Dad, I'm going to prove it to you. We're going back tomorrow. So we went back and he actually beat me in the first game. So I'm officially washed.
But you know what? That means that you had something to be washed, so that's
true.
So, so after school, after you graduated from high school and everything, what was the next step in your journey?
The planned next step or the actual next step?
Well, what was the next? Let's go with what you had originally planned. What was that route going to be?
I was like, I wrote on the newspaper all throughout high school, but again, a small school because I wanted to, and there was an opportunity. I was going to go to Mizzou, which at that time I thought was one of the best journalism schools in the country. And I was going to be a sports writer or a sports broadcaster. That was my plan coming out of high school. That plan stayed on track. I don't even know if it was a week into college, and I just went there, and all of a sudden there are all these different people and all these different things to experience. and I went absolutely bananas.
I mean, yep. I mean, that's basically what. Yep.
Yeah, I left after one semester with like somehow in one semester I left with like $12,000 in debt and
Mm.
one credit hour, I think. They may give me a partial for one class. I believe my GPA was 0.614. And I spent the next, I guess, 12 years finishing my college degree. I graduated college when I was 30. So,
Okay.
but yeah, in between then, I became a dad at 20. And so I had to start, doing real work.
And we'll get into real work, but before we start talking more about adulthood, and when did you exactly fall into fantasy sports?
I was not playing fantasy sports in high school.
Okay.
Maybe my junior or senior year, and it might have been the year after, might have been freshman year of college. I don't remember. They used to have the USA Today fantasy game in the newspaper where you like called in and told them which players you were picking, and you had it was almost like DFS. Like you had a certain dollar amount for the year, salary cap, but if I remember right, it was yearly. And then I think you had to call in and get the scores actually on Monday because there was no internet for us. I mean, there was an internet, but there was nothing on the internet for
Yeah.
fantasy sports at that time.
Wow. So, well, because I didn't start playing fantasy football until like way late
Right.
for standards of playing fantasy football, and so I don't get the cool stories like we had this. I don't get to tell those kind of stories. So that's cool. And so, did you start off with fantasy football, or was there a different fantasy sport that you played prior to that?
No, it was fantasy football, but only because I saw that thing. I remember I remember buying a book about rotisserie baseball and I thought it was really cool, but I didn't know enough people and it wasn't like I could get on the internet and find people to play with. So I didn't do it. I knew what it was. And at that point in my life, I probably was a bigger fan of baseball and would have enjoyed, but man, after writing about fantasy baseball for a couple of years and then playing it for a couple of years, I was like, I don't even think I want to play this game anymore. It's too much work.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
And so when you started playing fantasy football and you got an actual, into a league,
Mhm.
how did you go about getting involved in a league and getting all that together?
One of my friends, and actually it's a league that's still going. I think this was 1 or 2 years out of high school. There were 15 of us that all graduated together or 1 year in either direction. And I remember that first draft in his mom's basement. It was actually oddly enough with CBS, and we had the CBS draft board up on the wall and had the stickers and all that stuff. But it was just something where we just decided to do it. And really funny story. Like we actually moved that league off of CBS like 5 years in because somebody said, this other place has all these fancy options, and like half the league wanted to quit because they didn't want to learn something new.
Yeah,
So
right.
we went back to CBS, and we've been there ever since. But yeah, it was a CBS sports league. It was a 15-team league. We had bye weeks at the time. Now there's only 13 of us left in the league. One of the guys actually passed away last year. And one of the guys went 3 or 4 years without talking to any of us, so we kicked him out of the league. But now we have doubleheader week instead of bye week. But yeah, it's been going for I guess 20 plus years.
That is so cool that you guys have been able to like keep it together and everything. And the first draft, you said you guys had the stickers and everything. So your first draft experience was an in-person live draft.
100%, yes.
And so for people that have never gotten to experience that before, like how cool is it, or kind of describe the atmosphere of having a live draft?
Well, and I don't know, I think it depends. Everybody's experience might be a little different, but at that point in our life, like we were a bunch of guys in our early 20s or late teens, and it was kind of debauchery. There was not a lot of sobriety or anything like that going on, but it was like we would order barbecue each year, or we'd order wings or pizza or whatever, and it was a fantastic environment. Now, all of us live in different places. I think the guys are actually all flying to one of our friends' house in Colorado this year for the draft, but it's always the end of August and I can't travel that time of year. So I haven't been in person for quite a while. They usually have me on Zoom.
And so I will touch back on Friends and everything in a little bit, but I want to go back into the career in actual fantasy sports. How did you decide that was the path that you were now going to go down?
I don't know that I decided it. I was writing blogs for free for a long time as I worked all those adult jobs. And then, like, for our league, actually, I started writing just like a weekly funny article thing. And one of the guys in my league actually shared, this was in 2010, maybe, or 11, Sigmund Bloom's tweet saying they were looking for game recappers. And he's like, you should do this. And it was just like one game a week. You wrote like 150, 200 words on it. And that was the only thing I did that first season. But I saw that tweet. I sent a message to Bloom, and that was probably the best DM I ever sent. I don't even think it was a DM. I think it was an email. But yeah, it was fantastic.
That's great. I mean, they're great people over there, and so prior to writing, your adult jobs, quote unquote adult jobs, like, what did you decide that you were going to do when you were out here as an adult coming into your own, trying to figure out what you were going to do with your life?
Well, I mean, for a big part of that time, it was like, how can I make enough money to get by? It had very little to do with what I wanted to do. And I was in a weird situation for a lot of that time too, because I was a single dad for about 4 of those years. And so I ended up in sales because that was the place where I could make enough money without any sort of degree in that area. And so I sold cars for a while. I sold insurance. I sold houses. I sold just about anything. And it wasn't like, I don't know that I really loved it, but at the same time, that a lot of the stuff that you do in sales, you do in fantasy football. So it
Yep.
fits.
I was going to ask you about that. Are you a fan of like trades and fixing your roster that way?
I'm very much a fan of trades. I get myself in trouble with trades all the time because I'll just decide, I get a wild hair one week and decide I'm going to make a bunch of trades. And
Yeah.
I'm probably not discerning enough when I'm doing that. And then I'll go 4 months without even thinking about making a trade.
So, but I'm sure you're pretty good at selling people on certain players, even if they're not the greatest player out there.
I do not recall the last time somebody in my home league made a trade with me.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed. But yeah, I think it's tough. I feel like it's much easier to get a trade done if you can get a conversation going.
Mm-hmm.
But so many times you send out a bunch of trade offers and it's just crickets.
Yeah, that happens. It does. And that's why I asked the question about trades, is because some people are like totally like, either they're like, I just don't know how to do it, or I just, like there's lots of different reasons why people
Right.
don't want to participate in the trade aspect of a league. But like dynasty leagues, dynasty fantasy football is becoming such a big thing as the years progress. Like, how has it been seeing redraft take off and then dynasty start blowing up?
It's been a trip because like I saw redraft take off, and then I kind of got this job at CBS because they were trying to get into DFS. And at that time I'd gotten really into DFS and I saw that take off. And then best ball was kind of like the season long version of that. And that took
Mm-hmm.
off. But I think they're all fantastic. Dynasty is my favorite though. And like when I got to CBS, we had maybe one dynasty article a year. And now we've built up a pretty good following for that. And I do think it's growing, but that's the most fun way to make trades. And I would say for people that don't know how to get a trade done, you could do what I do, and it's just spam. I'll find, like, I'm going to trade for this type of player, and I'm going to make 7 offers to 7 different people and tell them all, I've made 7 offers. Do you want that?
Yeah, I like that. Hey, and that's good. And because you said you put out trades for a bunch of this type of player, so I know you do a lot of like tier based
Mhm.
rankings and things of that nature. So your work with putting out that kind of content, what made you decide that was some of the things that you wanted to dive into?
I think first off, tiers are a lot better than rankings, but everybody wants rankings. So
Right.
knowing that I'm going to have to do rankings, it's almost like I'm going to do tiers as well, because that's the way I would like to display it. And I think it's a more accurate way to look at things, because the difference between running back 14 and running back 20 may not be as big as the difference between running back 20 and running back 21. And rankings, you can't display that, but you can't get away from doing them because that's what everybody wants to consume.
That is what everybody wants to consume. I've never even done any rankings. I don't think I'll ever do rankings. I do write down the players I think are, in
Right.
groups, tiers. So but when you're putting out the content like that, and you're putting out rankings, because I hear rankings are hard to put out. They're a difficult thing to really so
Yeah.
how do you fine tune that?
Well, like the way I decided a long time ago with the way my brain works was I'm completely dissatisfied with just, oh, I like this guy more than this guy, I like this guy. Like if I did it that way, I would change it every day because I
Right.
feel different every day. So I just started building my own projections for redraft, and then I built a system for building out dynasty projections. And then what I do is I have that ranking that is a start for my rankings, and then I go through that and say, okay, I do not want Miles Sanders at running back 20, so I just drop him. Just like it's the projections and then Heath's feelings about it.
And that's good to have your feelings involved. I think too many people don't want to lean on their own feelings. Do you ever
Right.
get people coming in and getting upset with you because something didn't work out the way that they wanted it to on their lineup? Or is that not a thing you really have to deal with?
No, like it does. It happened a lot when I first started. And I feel bad now because now people that we bring on to the show in particular, and I don't know what it is, like the first year somebody's with us, everybody hates them. And then by year 2 or year 3, like 90% of the people that consume our content are positive
Yeah.
and really, really good people. But that first year is
Mhm.
just really hard to break into. And I think it's just because they listen so much
Yeah.
and like they kind of formed the little group with us. And now who's this guy?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I hadn't never really thought of it that way, but that does make sense. It is hard, especially it's hard when you first start to kind of build like a fan group or a
Mhm.
base of people that actually are like consuming your content, and you started with football guys like you said. You may not have said football guys, but I'm saying football
I
guys.
should have
I know
said
you said
football guys. Yeah,
Sigmund
football guys
Sigmund,
are
but
awesome. Joe Bryant's awesome. Sigmund
yes,
Bloom's awesome.
Joe Bryant
Awesome.
was on here, and yeah, I have nothing but nice things to say about him as well. So, getting that opportunity is huge. I mean, it's football, guys. It's huge. So when you were able to get that opportunity, how did that actually play out?
It was a year of, like I said, just writing probably 200 words a week about one game, and then I loved it. Like I was like, I want to do this all the time,
Hmm.
and I started kind of trying to build a little bit of a resume. And I sent an email actually to Joe, and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna apply for some jobs and see if I can get a little bigger role somewhere. Would you be willing to give me a reference?" And he emailed me back a few hours, if I remember right, later and said, "Hey, would you like to be a staff writer?" So I was like, "Yes, that's exactly what I wanted." And that first couple of years, it's a real, I guess you'd call it organic process at football. And I won't really reveal too much. And I don't know if it's still that same way. It's been 7 years since I was there, but when I was there, it was really about just like pitch what you want to do.
Hmm.
And if you want to do rankings, do rankings. If you want to do dynasty rankings, do dynasty rankings. And if you want to come up with a new, like I came up with an article idea, believe it or not, and on Mondays, I'd write about things that happened and do whether I believed it or not. I'm still writing that article at CBS. So it like they just gave you the culture there gave you such an opportunity to try things out and to do what you wanted to do, which I think is pretty unique in this industry and in any job. And I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, they continuously have people writing over there that just blow up and do such awesome things in the space, and obviously you're one of those people who just blew up, and people know who you are, which, it's pretty cool to be able to say like, hey, people know who I am in this space. Do your friends, especially the ones that you're still in leagues with, do they come to you for fantasy advice, or they kind of do they want to be in leagues with you? Like, how does that all work out? Because I know some friends are like, and some friends are like, So,
Yeah, there's a range there for sure. I've got a couple of guys who are like close friends and they're my biggest cheerleaders. And like they'll text me after a podcast and say how they liked something or like an inside joke that's on the podcast just to let me know that they've been listening or they've been reading. I've got some who every single time they've ever beat me respond with, "They pay you to do this?" So it's a wide range, but most of them will text me like Sunday morning if I'm playing them and say, "Should I start this guy or this guy?" But not like the other weeks, but just the week that I'm playing them, they want me to give them advice.
Of course. Um, so I want to know because a lot of people that listen to the show are trying to get their content out and they just don't know how to go about getting it out there and getting eyes on it. What kind of advice do you have for somebody that's trying to get more people to have their eyes or their ears on their content?
I mean, the first thing I would say, because they hire, it seems like 6 new people every year, is look for when football guys is hiring. Like I can't give much,
Yeah.
but seriously, like besides that, there are new opportunities, and there's not as many opportunities, especially paid, as there are people who want to do it. I
Right.
understand that, but there's a lot of, I think there's probably quite a bit of turnover, and there's a lot of just new things popping up all the time. So I I, I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter, but in terms of getting jobs in this industry and finding ways to get your content out there, I think it's one of the best ways. And it's a mix between like you need to do something that makes you a little bit unique, but also you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. And the uniqueness thing is so I don't know, it's hard for me to like grasp because I think it's hard in the fantasy space to be super unique.
Mhm.
So for somebody that's trying to like they're not really sure what kind of content they want to put out there, what kind of advice would you have for somebody that's like debating whether they want to put out written content? Do they think they need to put out a podcast? Do they think they
Mhm.
need so that they, don't
Well,
spread themselves too thin for starters,
yeah, I mean, well, I would say maybe do a little bit of everything
Okay.
for at first. Like
Right.
try all of those things and even TikTok. I still don't have a TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for CBS to tell me I have to have a TikTok. But like all those things, because you're going to find one or two of them that you actually enjoy doing. And I think early on, those are the things you should focus on because you're going to get better quicker at things you like to do than you are at things that are kind of a chore. The other thing is the unique factor doesn't have to be a new type of content or a new format. A lot of the unique factor is just having your own voice
Yeah.
and like being you because there's not another one of you. And people kind of struggle with that. They want to conform, I think, a little bit and just be who you are.
I like that. I wrote it down so I can remember that there's not another one of me. Uh, so with football guys and putting out content there, then getting on with CBS and being able to do CBS work for CBS Sports and everything. How did that come about?
Well, like there's a little bit, I think, of a backstory because was at that point. I mean, at Football Guys, when I started there. I think I was actually not running. I was a mid-level manager at a insurance company call center because I was looking for something more stable at that point. And then I became an insurance agent. And as part of this insurance agent gig, they had a set budget. I had to spend so much money on advertising. And after the first year, I hated it because I didn't actually think any advertising for insurance agents was working.
Yeah.
But I had to spend it. And so there was the Sports Radio 810 was the big sports radio station in Kansas City at the time. And they had a sister station called ESPN 1510 that wasn't near as popular, but they sold time on Saturday mornings. And like most of the people, I don't know if you've ever listened to sports radio on Saturday mornings, but it's a lot of like mortgage brokers, or sometimes it's sports gambling guys. Sometimes it's retirement investment guys who have bought the hour.
Yeah.
I bought the hour as an insurance agent, did a fantasy football show, and then all the commercials were for me as an insurance agent.
Oh,
and
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic because then
Yeah.
I spent the advertising, but got to do a radio show. And the best part was like, I don't think many people listen to that station, But when I put on my resume that I had my own fantasy football show on ESPN 1510,
Yeah.
like nobody knows that. So I applied. It's probably after I'd been at Football Guys for 4 or 5 years, maybe 3 or 4. I kind of started applying for some full-time stuff because that wasn't a full-time gig.
Right.
And I think maybe it was Fox Sports that I got a little ways through the process with. Mostly I got absolutely nothing, not even an answer, never an interview. CBS, the HR guy called me and he liked the resume. And I think he told me there were 620 people applying for one position. So I didn't really, after that first call, I didn't really want to tell my wife about it because I didn't think it would happen. I didn't want to freak her out. But yeah, I went through 3 or 4 interviews, flew down to Fort Lauderdale and met everybody. And somehow I'm here.
Well, that's awesome. The backstory. I didn't know the backstory of ESPN 1510. So I was like, I didn't know the backstory about that show. So that's really cool to hear. That's like that's thinking outside the box. That's awesome. So being on the radio and being, a podcaster and being in front of the camera and all of those things, were you comfortable with that from the beginning, or was that something that it took time to get comfortable with?
The radio show, the first couple of times I was almost physically ill, I think, because I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I was driving to a radio show hoping that they let me in the door. I didn't work there. I think I showed up like 45 minutes before the show. If I remember, I'm pretty sure Bloom was my first guest, just as a favor, and I appreciate that. But yeah, I had absolutely just completely flying by the seat of my pants. I guess you would call it a rundown that I had scribbled on a notebook piece of paper. Had no idea what I was doing. After that, though, like 2 or 3 weeks, I loved it. Radio and podcasts are the thing that I could just sit there and do forever, and it's not work. Being on camera is way different for me. I'm more self-conscious. I don't enjoy it more. I'm just constantly tense. I do a 2 or 3 hour bit on TV and I get off and I'm like sore. It's like I was lifting or something because I was that tense the entire time.
I've never done it. I don't know how I would be in front of it, but the speaking and putting out podcasts and everything, do you listen to yourself back, or is that something that you ever did at the beginning?
I did at the beginning a lot. I hate it, and I feel like I don't have to anymore, so I don't. I think people should, and if I would probably be better if I still did, but it's really awful. And I think most people feel that way.
Yes. So podcasting though, and having like co-hosts, having guests and all of that, being able to bounce things off of other people and have such a good, camaraderie with the people that you're talking with, co-hosts and the like. What is the importance of being able to communicate well with the others, that if you decide to go that route and have a podcast where there's multiple hosts?
Well, yeah. And I think I would suggest, even if you want to do a kind of a show by yourself, having somebody on for part of the show makes it better. It's really important. It's really gotten more difficult. Maybe the only thing that I don't like about work from home, and a lot of this started before work from home because Adam Azer moved away. But when we used to be able to do podcasts with 3 or 4 of us sitting in the same room, that was an awesome dynamic, and the chemistry was incredible, and it was really like, it was just fun and easy. And it's more difficult when you're doing it over Zoom, when you're all in different rooms. You step on each other's toes a little bit more. You don't get the same the vibe, and somebody starts to get mad because we're having an argument. You don't necessarily know they're getting mad until, so it's definitely harder this way. But I wouldn't change it because everything else about working from home is better.
Yeah, I was about to say, was there anything about working from home what is the coolest part about being able to work from home? How about that?
Everything besides not being able to podcast in person. No. It really is like not having to drive to work. being able to have lunch by just going downstairs and making lunch, everything. My legs are a little bit sore. I'm gonna do some yoga for 10 minutes. Like, it's just
Yeah.
everything is better.
I'm jealous because like I worked from home for a little bit at the beginning, and then so yeah, I envy people who are able to work from home. Yeah. So but also, so being a dad and having how old did you say your youngest child was again?
Well, my youngest child is 12, but
Okay.
here's another. Some people know this.
Okay.
I'm also a grandfather.
Okay.
My 22-year-old daughter still lives in the house, and
Mhm.
her 4-year-old lives with us. So I've
Okay.
got a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 4-year-old under one roof. It's an adventure.
So how is working from home and having everybody there?
For the most part, it's worked out really well. And maybe partially that's because like the 22-year-old and the 20-year-old don't want to be around me anyway. And everybody else is gone for parts of the day. The summer, it's a little bit more of a challenge just because my wife's a teacher
Mhm.
and the 12-year-old's in school. And so there's more people in the house, and it's more of a, I feel like I'm inconveniencing them because, okay, I don't have an actual office. This entire setup is in my bedroom. So, honey, I'm doing a show at 9 o'clock tonight. You can't go to bed until 10:30. So she doesn't love that.
Yeah, right.
But they are all so understanding and supportive that they don't ever get in the way of what I'm doing. I just feel bad that I'm in their house doing things.
Yeah, I mean, being in the bedroom, man, that's a kinda, I wanna go to bed, so
Yes. Yes. It's
but
not,
it's
I
okay.
get, yeah,
You know what? But, my wife would be like, "Hell no," but this is your career, so maybe if it was my career, she'd let me do that. So what's the weirdest place you've ever podcasted from? Have you ever got to or the coolest place you've ever got to talk to somebody at?
well, I mean, the coolest thing I've got to do in this whole job was the year. I guess it wasn't technically before the pandemic. It was just before we knew the pandemic was here. The
Mhm.
2020 Super Bowl was in Miami, and our offices are in Fort Lauderdale. So that was the first time they had sent me and all of us to Radio Row. And so
Oh.
we had a set on Radio Row and interviewed Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry, and all those guys were coming by. And I'm not great with pop culture references. So is it Lil Nas X?
Oh, yeah.
This that was right at the time that he had the cowboy song, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah? Yeah,
No,
I don't know.
who
It's hard for yeah, yeah.
he had the cowboy song though, right?
The
Who had the cowboy
What,
song?
the Old Town Road one?
Yes.
Yeah, that is him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're doing an interview with one of those guys, and like I'm starstruck and trying to do my job. And then here comes the biggest posse of the entire Radio Row week, and it's him wearing this leather jacket and leather pants and no shirt, and has like 30 people walking through with him. And it was such a surreal experience. And I think I just completely ignored whatever football player I was talking to for like 10 seconds. I was like, huh? But yeah, it was very cool. That was the coolest for sure.
Wow, yeah, that does sound cool, and I can picture that in my head, like, perfectly, 'cause I mean, that's his outfit that he always yeah, so I can picture that. That sounds really awesome. Do you get starstruck by athletes when you're talking to them ever?
Yeah, I
Like, in
mean, I
situations?
don't know. I don't do it a lot anymore, and when I do, it's over Zoom, so probably not as much. That first time at the Super Bowl, yeah, I think
Mhm.
so. Like that was, but like the first time I was doing a CBS show, I was a little bit starstruck by Dave and Jamie. Like I hadn't had any interactions like that before, and so it's something you kind of grow through, and then you do it a couple times, and then it's no big deal anymore.
When you guest on other people's podcast, how is it guesting on somebody else's podcast versus having your own podcast?
Probably better because you don't have to do it very much of the pre-work. You just
Yeah.
show up and answer the questions most time. No, I enjoy doing it, and I really enjoy like this time of year because I 2 years ago, I decided I'm not going to do guest spots during the season at all.
Mhm.
I'd like to, I just don't have time to do that.
Right.
And so I do as many as I can from January through July. And I've probably been on 40 different podcasts over the last 6 or 7 months. And it's a lot of fun to see the different ways that people do things and the different things people are doing.
Yeah.
And there's not very many of them that are alike.
Right.
And yeah.
Ed, like I know that you've hopped on with a bunch of people. I even asked like Russ Dynasty Outhouse, because I know
Mhm.
that you've gone on with Trade Addicts and everything. And everybody's always like, he's a great interview. He's a great guy to talk to. He's a great guy to have on your podcast. So it's really cool, and I know that people get starstruck when you come on their podcast as well. How do you have to know that some people get nervous when they're about to talk to you. How do you make sure that the situation is comfortable for everybody?
First off, that's ridiculous.
I'm just
But that's all.
saying.
You're right. It's
It wasn't
true. Like,
it's not me. I would never get
I know you wouldn't.
nervous ever.
People have. I generally the only way I know that is because someone will actually say that they are. And like I do think it's ridiculous, but for the most part, I think I just kind of ignore it and just talk to them like I'm talking to a person because I'm
Right.
talking to a person. And after a few minutes, it's over because I'm not anything special, and they're going to find that out pretty quick.
Well, we're 40 minutes into this podcast, and I think you're pretty special. We've learned a lot of really fun stuff so far. But I will say, I like to like at least do a quick Google search to try to find out like something about the guests that maybe people haven't seen on the Googles. And
This is scary.
well, the thing is, here's the deal. I found this really ridiculous website called factbuddy.com. And it has facts about you, sir, that sounds like an AI generated fact sheet. I don't know. It says that you're a man of above average stature. It says you're 5'7". We've already established you are not 5'7", correct?
No, I'm about 6'2". I'm not sure if I've started shrinking yet or not, but I think I'm around 6'2".
So you were also born to loving and caring parents in a state in the United States. Is that correct?
Those are true. At least one loving and caring parent.
Man. It also says that you're a secretive person. You've kept your marital status confidential, which
I don't like. It's on my Facebook profile. They could have found that pretty easy.
Okay. And then it says that I feel like they could just listen to this podcast and get the answers to all these questions. Also, you're very secretive about your education details.
Well,
Kept away from the public eye despite being a famous sportscaster.
I think it's possible that they looked at my college transcripts and thought I should be. I'm not.
Anyway, there were a lot of more ridiculous things on there. Salary, all kinds of made up like stats and facts about your like 5'7" self and all the other stuff that I learned. So I was like, that's not helpful at all. So I'm glad we could clear up.
Fact Buddy is the name of this website.
There's a ton more on there. I was like, are we going to hit on? Oh, and they also called you Health. Do you get called Health on accident in text messaging
but
often?
there's that does bring up at least a story that a lot of people don't know. So not a story, but a fact. My first name is actually Brian, and my middle name is Heath. And I would guess that I could give you 5 chances to spell my first name, maybe 4, and you would not get it correct. Which is weird because you wouldn't think there's that many ways to spell Brian.
Right.
But it's Bryon.
Bryon.
That's not the way it is. And I've always gone by Heath. So when I talk to people who don't know me, I get one of 2 things. It's either Byron, because you see Bryon and it's Byron until people fix it, or they hear Heath and they call me Keith because apparently no one's ever met another person named Heath.
I have met one Keith. Or Heath. See, I did it. Whoops. I've met one Heath besides you. So,
There was, and it's funny, like that tiny town that I lived in, there was a Heath that was a year older than me in my school, and we played on the same basketball team.
Oh, wow. Small world. I mean, that's crazy that there would be.
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad that, Fact Buddy was able to help us get to at least what your first name really
there we go.
is. And there we go. Thanks, Fact Buddy. Anyway, okay, so there are a lot of really awesome things in the fantasy community. Obviously, the fantasy community is, I mean, there's, Scott Fishbowl. You've got all the different expos, conferences, all kinds of things. And are you a part of the Scott Fishbowl?
Oh yeah, yes.
Oh yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to get to go shopping, I believe 4 years in a row now. The last 2 years I've actually gone with Kenny from RotoWare, and we've done the trip together. But it's like my kids look forward to it every year. It's one of the best things that we get to do as a family. It's a fantastic organization. Scott Fish is just an amazing human being. And I'll give a shout out to somebody else who's involved with that, like John Bosch and the stuff he does with the FC eliminators.
Yeah.
I've been doing those for 4 or 5 years now as well. It's just the money that gets raised through that and the people that get helped. It's fantastic.
The shopping experience with Kenneth, that sounds dope enough. Like, just like that just sounds like a great, like, ooh, I'd like to be on that, that shopping trip with you guys. I've never got the opportunity to do a shopping trip like that for like Toys for Tots or anything. What was that whole experience like, and what kind of toys were you going after?
Well, that was the thing. Like, you don't like. I think the first year we had $2,000, and so
Yep.
we got through that. I would give. I think I gave each kid their age group, and so they went and filled a cart with kids for their age group. That was back when the older kids were kids. And then my wife did like the babies because, of course, and I just went to the sporting goods. I just filled a shopping cart with a sporting good. But then we take it up there, and it's 4 carts worth of stuff. And they're like, "Yeah, you're at $1,100." So we all got to go back and get another cart. This year, I mean, we couldn't hardly spend, like, it was just it's overwhelming the amount of, and you see the pictures of the shopping carts.
Yeah.
There's like a dozen shopping carts lined up now, in 10 different locations. The amount of toys that we're getting, and the number of kids that are getting presents because of this, it's amazing. But the looks you get, because we've always just gone to Target, because they do a pretty good job of helping us out with sales tax and discounts and stuff like that.
Cool.
The looks you get from people in the store. We've had a few experiences where people were early. We usually do it in November, so I guess it's not early Christmas shopping. It's just Christmas shopping. It's early for me because I don't do that until like mid-December. But we've had a couple of times where like we took all of something and then somebody was looking for that. So now we've started trying to just take all but one of something. So there's still one of all the things left. The looks from kids when they see all the shopping carts lined up. But then, like, there's also the funny things you don't realize or even think about, but the Target registers really just freak out if you have a purchase over $1,000. And trying to use the red card to get another discount just freaks the whole thing out. So we've learned, and now we've learned, like, do it in this dollar of increments and do it with this card and do it, have multiple registers. It's a little smoother now, but the first couple of years it was a process.
Yeah, it sounds like a process. I was like, wow, I didn't know you needed a whole, like, breakdown of what you go here and you do this and this, how many carts we need. Like, the whole process just sounds like a blast, but also like, oh man, I'd have to be the person that follows you guys around the store and has you guys tell me what to do.
Come on down in November.
All right. I mean, I might. Florida, being from Florida, Florida man is a big, they're always like, a Florida man. Is that just how do you feel when people bring up Florida man and it's Florida and Florida this and Florida that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a Florida native, so I
Right.
don't take any offense to it. My favorite current beer right now is actually called Florida Man.
There we go.
It's from a Tampa brewery. So
Okay.
no, it's 100% true. It's accurate, and it's a really interesting place to live, especially growing up as sheltered as I
Yeah.
did. um, so, but also like there's a little bit of Florida man that is just very, very common to rural Midwest and the South. It's the
Yeah, I mean,
hold my beer
yeah.
and watch this. There's just more people, so there's more of it.
I think that Texas and Florida are those states that get to get the little bit of jabs in every now and then about that kind of stuff. So I feel you there. You are big into barbecue, big into meat. You have, I mean, your Instagram with beer and meat. It's just wonderful. To look at all those photos. I know it has to taste wonderful as well. When did you get into barbecue, and how did you get into all of that?
That goes. I mean, I was really bad at it, but that goes all the way back to high school. I didn't. I told you I loved baseball, but
Right.
I wasn't any good at it, or wasn't good enough to play past middle school. And so we would go to the high school baseball games and set up in the outfield. And I would set up one of those little tailgating grills, and I would grill during the game. And I did a really bad job and got a bunch of people sick one time on undercooked brats, but I always loved it. I really got into like smoke because it was mostly grilling until about probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I really started to get into smoking, and I enjoy that much more because it takes a lot longer and gives you an excuse to sit on the patio for 12 hours at a time.
Sitting out on the patio for 12 hours at a time sounds fun. For real. I know not everybody gets that. Having that experience and being to actually get to do that sounds fun. I've never done it. For somebody who's just wanting to get started in the whole
Mhm.
game, what kind of advice do you have for them?
First off, I would say start with pork butt because I think it's close to the easiest, and it's not a real expensive piece of meat. So if you screw it up, you only cost yourself 20 or $30 instead of if you screw up a brisket and you're out 120 bucks. The second thing I would say is it's as long as you keep the temperature around 225, or for some things 250, 275, as long as you keep the temperature right, you're probably not going to cook it for too long. Most of the time, people don't cook it for long enough. And that's when it's not tender enough. It doesn't pull like it should as far as pulled pork, or the ribs not quite fall off the bone. So if you're going to cook it an hour or less or an hour long, cook it an hour long.
Do you remember the best thing that you ever cooked?
That's a tough one because there are certain things like the thing about sitting on the patio for 12 hours, especially if it's some sort of event, it does often involve like the fantasy draft debauchery. But I think probably the brisket that I cooked the first Chiefs Super Bowl appearance, the one they won, and maybe it was just better because they won. But there's a process, and if you go to the stores down here, most of them, when you get a brisket, they just sell you the flat. And a whole brisket has what's called the flat and the point. And the point is the fattier part. And when you're making a brisket, like if it has both, eventually you'll cut the point off. And in Kansas City, what we do is we'll chop that up into little, almost bite-sized cubes
Hmm.
after the whole thing's cooked, and then put it in an additional rub and or sauce and put it back on for another hour to 2 hours, and it's burnt ends.
Yeah.
And the burnt ends I made that time to go with the brisket, which was really good too, is the best that I can remember. Other people might have different answers.
I mean, it's probably all good, honestly. Um, s-
Well,
uh,
I can tell you it's not.
no,
It took me a while. It's just a learning process.
yeah.
That's the other thing, I guess, if you want to figure out how to do it, is don't expect to do it perfect the first time.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, and that goes for everything. Fantasy
Right.
football and smoking meat, cooking meat. There's all the different, the Carolina versus Memphis
Right.
versus, Texas, and then, Kansas City. So like, are you one of those people that's like an elitist where only I'm just kidding, but you know what I mean? Like, do you poo-poo or frown upon the other types of barbecue?
I do not. Like, I do kind of it's not a judging thing, even though it is.
Yeah.
Like, when I make something and this is kind of a Texas thing, like, you guys don't I don't
Mhm.
think use a lot of sauce on barbecue there. If I don't put sauce on anything except for, like, leftovers the next couple of days because it starts to dry out, but if I make something and
Mhm.
the first bite they take, they put sauce on it, that irks me a little bit because I would like for you to taste what it tastes like.
That makes sense. I'll
Yeah.
have to think about that the next time. I don't eat a lot of barbecue, even though I am in Texas. I don't eat a lot of barbecue, so I will keep that in mind. Taste the meat first. Don't cover it in sauce, and
Because it
see.
might not even need any.
It might not eat. I think we're at a young age or trained
Yes.
a certain way when it comes to eating food because I used to eat my steaks well done all the time because that's how my parents cooked them for me as a child. And now that I'm an adult, I'm like, why was I
What
eating jerky all this
I
time?
I've got a story about that as well. My
Okay.
wife, not well done, but my wife was like a medium well, definitely not lower than medium steak person, and, I mean, she probably 10 years ago, I was cooking steaks, and it was pretty late, it was after dark, and we were watching a movie, and so we had the lights off, and I got the steaks done, and we got the food, and we just went in and sat on the couch and ate in the dark watching the movie, and she said, "This is the best steak you've ever made." I said, "Well, thank you." And we ate and we got done and we go into the kitchen and turn on the light and her plate's just bright red. And she figured out that I mean, I didn't do that on purpose. I screwed up and made
Right.
it better.
You made it better. And there you go.
So she
Sometimes
likes
that's how
medium
it
rare
works
okay
out.
now.
Okay. Well, that's a way to convert her over. I like it. um, I want to know more about just how you fell in how Dynasty and how you found out about Dynasty because I mean, obviously redraft is everybody's first, not
Right.
everybody's first start, but usually people start off doing redraft. How did you transition?
Yeah, I think the start was with that home league, we started keeping 2 players a year. And then we liked that. And so a couple years later, we started keeping 4 players a year. And so it was like I think for a lot of people, the keeper is the transition between redraft and dynasty. And that's what I tell people. Like people are saying, we're thinking about turning our home league into a dynasty league.
Mhm.
I'm like, well, start with a few keepers and see if everybody likes that. And then you can go all the way. Our league is different in that half the guys are pretty casual. So we'd never fully transitioned to dynasty in that league because it would have probably ruined things. We need to have I think if you have some guys that aren't paying attention,
Mhm.
you need to have that annual redraft and maybe they'll catch lightning in a bottle. But it was really football guys.
Yeah.
I started there and there was a staff dynasty league and I think it was IDP even, and I had played a little bit IDP, but not very much. And I actually won the first year, probably luck. And I was just hooked. Like I loved it.
That's awesome. So IDP, that's a whole different beast as
Mhm.
well. Um, do you still do IDP?
Oh yeah, I've got 3 or 4 IDP leagues. I think it's especially if you were just going to play one league,
Mhm.
that would be the way I would absolutely wanna play. You can't have too many of them because it's a bear,
Yeah.
and you're talking 40-man rosters, and I really like I've got a couple where you start 7, 8, 9. I've played in leagues where you start a full 11-man defense, but it's 11 individual defenders, and I really enjoy it, but it's a lot more information to know, and because I don't ever write about it or talk about it,
Yeah.
I'm probably not quite as good at it.
Well, what is the biggest challenge when you're doing an IDP draft? Like compared to like if you were just doing a regular like redraft league, for instance, and it was all offensive players versus, doing something like IDP, what is that biggest challenge you think?
Well, I mean, the biggest challenge is finding the content to like, I don't have my own IDP rankings. I don't have
Yeah.
any IDP projections. So there is good IDP content out there, but I think there's not a lot of it because there's not a lot of IDP leagues. And so
Mhm.
finding the right content is the biggest challenge. And then not just that, but like I'm not the type of person, even when before I was doing this, I was never very good at just going to find rankings and being okay with that. I wanted to know why the people thought the things that they did. And so a lot of the IDP stuff you'll find, especially for free or just readily, quickly, is just a set of rankings. And I'm like, why? And so, yeah, I think that's the hardest thing. And then it's also year over year, we hear on Twitter about every wide receiver can't battle, running back can't battle. This guy's going to replace this guy. There are things that happen on the defensive side of the ball that we just don't talk about that much.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, hey, this guy is now the starting linebacker and that guy played 25% of the snaps. And I didn't know that was going to happen.
That's great. All right, man. I know I'm bouncing all around. I had things that I wanted to talk to you about that I don't want to forget to bring up, but I heard a rumor that when you were a kid, you used to collect sports cards. Is that correct?
That was, man, you did good research. Was that on the Facts website or was that?
That was actually, no, it's on my actual own one. No, I think I overheard you said it on.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to give somebody credit, and I'm going to be the jerk who doesn't give somebody credit. You were on someone's podcast, and I heard you say it. I will, whoever you are, I'm going to give you a shout out at a later time. But yeah, I heard you say it on somebody's podcast.
Yeah, I still have, I think, like 8,000 or 10,000 cards around here somewhere, and I don't know why, because right when I got into it, the mid 80s was the time when they decided they were going to make 7 million of each card and they were never going to actually be worth anything again.
Yeah. But, isn't that's how it is. Yeah.
But I had an uncle who had a bunch of cards in the 50s and they'd got thrown away. And he was just constantly sick about how much money had been thrown in the trash. And so now I can't throw away these cards that are worth like 3 cents a piece. But no, I would sit in my room. And this was, I think, when I knew, and my parents probably knew, that I was going to do something like this, or hopefully, or I was just going to do it in my free time. I would sit in my room and have just hundreds of cards on the floor or on the bed around me. And I'm trying to find different ways to sort them or create new stats based on the stats that are on the back of the card. And apparently talking to either myself or the cards through this process, because I would have one of my parents come into my room. Like, you think your parents come into your room at 3 a.m. and you're awake, you're probably doing something wrong. No, they're coming to yell at me because they heard me talking to my baseball cards.
Well, I mean, do you watch any of those like card breaks that people do?
I have not. I haven't. I tried to get my kids into it,
yeah,
and they really didn't care that much because it's on a piece of paper and not on the internet.
Yeah.
So I've kind of lost touch with the whole thing.
It's all coming around, and it shows up on my YouTube algorithm somehow every now and then. So I'll click on them and see what's up.
I have definitely seen people tweeting about it. I've just never really gotten into it.
It's crazy to me, and it's really cool because like having a hobby and all that stuff, and being able to like have a YouTube channel and put it on there so people can watch you unbox cards, I guess, is a cool thing. So I also before we go on, I did look up where it was on with Zach FF Chalupa Batman. He did the Beyond the Analyst interview series.
Yes, that was a fantastic. Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, he is a good guy. So shout out to him, just to let you guys know. Sometimes I listen to your podcast every now and then when I have a little bit of time. But I did remember that from something, and so I had to go back and look. I wanted to bring up, you brought up like doing yoga if you wanted to and stuff. And I know you're a big meditation guy. I almost said mediation guy, but meditation guy, meditation. So how did you get into that, and how has that been for you?
I guess it's kind of a start and stop thing in the past. It's not anymore. It's an everyday thing now, but I had used it in my early 20s to try to quit smoking. And it worked for a little while, and then I started smoking again. And I had used it for kind of a couple other things, and I'd read some books. Now I'm going to have to look up the book that got me restarted. Basically, it happened in March or April of 2020 when the world completely stopped and I started reading books again. And I read a book about, and it was actually like more about being more efficient and being like a better, more productive person. But then it was centered around this meditation practice. Um, and it wasn't, that portion wasn't spiritual at all, but then there was also some spiritual stuff that I was doing at the same time. And I just got into a kind of a habit of, I generally meditate for 10 to 15 minutes every morning. If I'm really in a good place and it's not football season, I'll also do it in the afternoon. And I think there are enormous benefits for a variety of different things.
Do you ever feel like you're doing too much, you need to take a step back from some stuff, or how do you balance things to make sure that you don't get like burned out or overworked or feel like you don't have enough time in the world?
I mean, yes to the
Yes.
first question, and no, I have not figured out how to balance things
Yeah.
to keep from getting burnt out. I don't get burnt out. Like I should rephrase that. This time of year, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Mid-January through early August, I am one of the most chill guys. I'm completely centered. I'm meditating half an hour a day. I'm really eating right, exercising, everything's good. And then there's just 4 months where I don't take care of myself at all and I eat terribly and I don't meditate as much as I should, or I say should, not like it's like an obligation, but like should
Right.
because I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't take care of myself, but I don't know how to avoid it.
No, and you know, but the meditation and everything does help with like at least calming yourself down enough to like
It helps in a couple of different ways during football season, even
yeah.
in that it gives me like there's 15 minutes where I'm not doing anything. And
Mm,
then for the next hour, even though I'm doing things, I'm still in a pretty good place.
right.
It's really it's sad, and I'll try to change it this year that I don't do it in the afternoon or evening during football season because that's when I need it the most.
Right.
But no, it definitely like it's not even just the way I feel, like that's good. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some other benefits and that's great, but it's scientifically proven that doing it changes your brain for in a positive way. Like it's good for you, even if it doesn't make you feel good in the moment.
Something that does make you feel good is winning the Super Bowl. You talked
Yes.
about the Chiefs earlier. Um, do you have an all-time favorite player for the Chiefs?
Oh, it's 100% Patrick Mahomes, no
Oh, is it?
question.
Okay.
I I thought I was not a Chiefs fan, or I thought I was not going to be a team fan anymore about 3 years into my time at CBS. When I started at CBS, Dave and Jamie were both pretty much like they were not fans anymore. Now, every once in a while, those guys, you'll see a little something creep in from the teams they used to be fans of, and I kind of wonder if they're still kind of fans. They just say they're not. But I thought that was ridiculous when I started.
Yeah.
And then 3 years into it, I mean, part of it's the burnout and all that other stuff. And I was kind of like, yeah, I get it. Maybe it was 2 years even. But I loved Mahomes before the draft, and the Chiefs traded up to get him, and that just I was back in. And then that first season he started, I mean, it was one of the greatest quarterback seasons ever. And I'm just complete homer now.
So, are you one of the analysts that watches football, like actually watches it to enjoy it, not just for work, or how is watching football with you?
Well, I love it when the Chiefs don't play on Sunday. And thankfully with Mahomes, they've got a lot of island games now. Because I don't get to watch it's Sundays, or I still wouldn't say I don't enjoy it because I do, but it's a
Mhm.
different type of thing. But
Right.
like if the Chiefs are on the Sunday night game or the Thursday night game or the Monday night game, or even really the 4 o'clock game, um, it's better. I do it. I do watch them for enjoyment. Um, I maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, but if it's a Monday night game and it's the Jags against the Colts, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to pay attention. I'm not going to turn it off until it's over. But I'm working.
Yeah.
It's not something I want to do really.
Oh, that makes sense completely. Oh, and I don't blame you. So, are your family members, are they into fantasy football as well?
Well, no, I mean, they're into my job, I guess, but besides that, my youngest and I have played in a fantasy basketball league a couple of years, and he talked last year like he wanted to have in fact, he actually had a fantasy football team with me, but it doesn't hold his interest at all. It's just it's not the attention span for that type of thing is not there.
Right.
He loves basketball to a level far beyond how he feels about any other sport, and he loves the Chiefs,
Mhm.
but he doesn't care to and I think a lot of it really is 2K. Because of 2K, he knows every player in the NBA, and,
Yeah.
like, he will not be able to play with a team because 2K hasn't updated the dude's haircut, and it
Wow.
doesn't look like him, and so, he's not gonna play with him until they fix that. So he's really into basketball but he's not that I've kind of tried to rope them in a couple times and not so much.
Do you guys watch a lot of basketball?
Yes, I'm a Celtics fan, and so we this past playoff run's been a lot of fun, and my youngest has watched a lot of NBA. We used to watch a lot of Kansas basketball, college basketball before. I don't watch much college sports anymore, but yeah, we watch quite a bit of basketball.
And, but with the college sports thing, you used to be able to watch it more and everything. With that, with Dynasty, do you think it's important to know these players that are coming into the draft and everything? Like when, if you're not focused on watching college football and you don't know very much about college football, how do you navigate that if you're just like, "Mm,
It's a two-part thing. One,
okay,
I watch more college football in February than I do the entire college football season, by far. Two, I'm not a scout. Like I kinda know some things, but I'm not a scout at all,
mhm.
and so I trust people who are. Like, I really lean pretty heavy on, Matt Waldman. I think he does a fantastic job. And again, another football guy. But yeah, I'll trust the scouts for
Hey,
that part.
totally. Hey, and I'm cool with that too. Like I totally get you on that. And this is gonna sound like a football guy, Scott Fish, like we're not no, this is a podcast about you, but how many times can we bring up football guys
The
in one
friends we make along
podcast,
the way, right?
Right, exactly, exactly. Well, speaking of friends along the way, I do have to go in a moment since it's Friday and I have friends coming over and I have to
Good.
clean before they come over. No, but this is so awesome being able to talk to you and everything, and doing it on a Friday night is super cool too because I never get to record on the weekend and I'd rather do that just because it's when you have time. So before we go, I just want to give you the floor and let you tell everybody just where they can find you and what you have going on.
Yeah, I think like if I was gonna plug one thing, it would be we've got a Dynasty Fantasy Football Central page at CBS Sports now. And like I said, when I started there, we'd maybe have one or two Dynasty articles a year. I just updated that page today, and we've got June updates for Dynasty rankings for every position, Dynasty tiers for every position, a Dynasty top 150 and trade chart. We've got mailbags generally twice a month if I do what I'm supposed to do. We've got mock drafts. We have prospect profiles for all the rookies that we think are going to matter. So if you go to the CBS Sports page, you go to their fantasy football page, in the top right corner it says Dynasty Fantasy Central. Go there and check out the things that we've got going on.
Definitely. I mean, that sounds super rad, and everybody needs to go check that out right now. Do it right now. Right now. All right. So, thank you again, Heath, for coming on. It's been so awesome having you on the show. And for everybody that's listening right now, make sure that you come back next week for another episode of Get Real and Stay Rad.